On the evening of February 12, 1970, 6 motorists begin what should be routine journeys along California State Route 39 through the San Gabriel Mountains. By midnight, all 6 lie dead at the bottom of a rain-swollen canyon, their vehicles crushed and buried under thousands of tons of saturated earth and shattered rock. 6 families receive devastating news before dawn. 6 lives end not because of reckless driving or mechanical failure, but because a combination of unprecedented rainfall, inadequate geological surveys, and deferred maintenance creates a catastrophic slope failure that sends an entire section of mountain highway plummeting into darkness. The death toll of 6 makes this one of California's deadliest single road disasters of the decade, and the investigation that follows exposes systemic failures in how the state manages and maintains its mountain transportation corridors. If you want to understand how this tragedy claimed so many lives, subscribe to this channel. This episode is a fictionalized reconstruction inspired by real transportation accidents and transit safety investigations. Names, locations, and specific events have been created for storytelling purposes. The San Gabriel Mountains rise abruptly from the Los Angeles Basin, a dramatic geological barrier separating coastal California from the Mojave Desert beyond State Route 39. Snakes through these mountains, a 2-lane ribbon of asphalt carved into slopes so steep that engineers in the 1930s debate whether the route is even feasible. The road climbs from the foothill communities through narrow canyons, where sunlight penetrates only during midday hours, where the smell of pine and sage mingles with the perpetual dampness of shadowed earth. In February 1970, temperatures at the higher elevations hover just above freezing at night, warming to the mid-50s during brief afternoon sun. The road serves as a vital connection for mountain communities, forest workers, and recreationists, carrying an average of 800 vehicles daily during winter months. The section known as Mile Marker 47, where the highway traverses the eastern face of Iron Mountain, presents particular engineering challenges. Here, the roadbed sits on a bench cut into weathered granite and metamorphic rock, with the mountain rising nearly vertical for 200 feet above and dropping almost 400 feet to the canyon floor below. The cut slope angle exceeds 60 degrees in places, far steeper than modern standards allow. A retaining wall of mortared stone, built in 1938, supports the uphill side of the road, while the downhill edge features only a basic guardrail of wooden posts and steel cable. The sound of water flowing through the canyon below provides constant background noise, a musical rushing that intensifies during rain. The rock faces glisten with seepage even during dry periods, and moss grows thick on the shaded northern exposures. State Route 39 opens to traffic in 1939 as part of California's expansion of its mountain road network during the Depression era. The Works Progress Administration provides much of the labor, and construction methods reflect the technology and geological understanding of that period. Engineers survey the route primarily for grade and alignment, with limited investigation of subsurface conditions or long-term slope stability. The rock appears solid, the cuts seem stable, and the project moves forward. By 1970, the highway has served traffic for 31 years with relatively minor incidents. Caltrans maintenance records document periodic rockfalls, typically small events involving individual boulders or small sections of loose material. Maintenance crews respond to these incidents by clearing debris and occasionally installing additional drainage features. In 1958, a significant rockfall closes the road for 3 days, while crews remove approximately 40 cubic yards of material. The incident report notes that heavy rain precedes the failure, but attributes the rockfall to natural weathering processes rather than any systemic instability. In 1963, engineers conduct a routine inspection of the retaining walls and note several areas where mortar has deteriorated and stones have shifted. The report recommends repairs within 2 years, but budget constraints and competing priorities result in the work being deferred. By 1970, those repairs remain incomplete. The inspection cycle for this section of highway occurs every 3 years under standard Caltrans procedures of the era. The most recent inspection takes place in August 1968, during dry summer conditions when slopes appear stable and drainage systems seem adequate. The inspection report notes minor maintenance needs but identifies no immediate safety concerns. No follow-up inspection occurs during or after wet weather to assess how the slopes respond to saturation. The highway maintenance budget for the district covering Route 39 faces cuts in the 1969-70 fiscal year as California grapples with economic pressures. Preventive maintenance receives lower priority than emergency repairs and snow removal operations. The evening shift on February 12, 1970, finds 6 individuals traveling Route 39 for various reasons. Their paths converging on the same deadly section of highway. Robert Mitchell, 43 years old, works as a district ranger for the U.S. Forest Service and is returning home to the mountain community of Crystal Lake after attending a meeting in Azusa. His green Forest Service pickup truck is equipped with a 2-way radio, though radio coverage in the deep canyons proves spotty. Sarah Chen, 36, drives her family's station wagon back from visiting her mother in the valley. Her 2 children, ages 8 and 11, asleep in the back seat. Thomas Brennan, 58, operates a commercial logging truck, empty after delivering a load of timber to a mill in San Bernardino County, heading back to the logging camp where he has worked for 22 years. Jennifer Walsh, 29, recently hired as a teacher at the small mountain school, drives her compact sedan up the grade after spending the day shopping for classroom supplies. David Martinez, 41, a maintenance worker for the county road department, travels in his personal vehicle after completing paperwork at the district office. Patricia Donovan, 52, returns from a medical appointment in the city, her sedan equipped with new tires installed just the previous week. These 6 people, strangers to one another, share the road on a night when nature conspires with human oversight to create catastrophic conditions. The meteorological setup for disaster begins 5 days earlier when a series of Pacific storm systems stalls off the California coast. The first system moves ashore on February 7th, bringing moderate rain to the mountains. The second arrives on February 9th with heavier precipitation. By February 11th, a third and most powerful system develops, drawing moisture from as far south as the Hawaiian Islands in what meteorologists later identify as an atmospheric river event. Rain begins falling on the San Gabriel Mountains on the morning of February 12th, and the intensity steadily increases throughout the day. By late afternoon, rainfall rates exceed 1 inch per hour at higher elevations, and the National Weather Service issues flood warnings for mountain and foothill communities. The rain falls as a steady, heavy downpour rather than in intense bursts, the kind of rain that soaks deep into the ground rather than running off immediately. Temperatures remain warm enough that no snow falls even at the highest elevations, meaning all precipitation enters the watershed as liquid water. The cumulative rainfall over the 5-day period exceeds 18 inches at some mountain locations, approaching the average for an entire winter season. The ground becomes completely saturated, every pore space in the soil filled with water, every crack in the bedrock conducting water deeper into the mountain. Springs that normally trickle begin to gush. Seeps appear on rock faces that are usually dry. The sound of water becomes omnipresent, rushing, gurgling, dripping from every surface. Visibility drops to less than 50 feet in the heavy rain. Fog settles into the canyons, and darkness comes early under the thick cloud cover. By 6 in the evening, conditions on Route 39 are miserable, but not yet considered impassable. The highway remains open, though Caltrans crews monitor several locations known for flooding and rockfall potential. No one monitors mile marker 47 specifically because it has never been identified as a high-risk location. The road surface runs with water, but drainage systems initially handle the flow. Motorists who traverse the route during early evening report heavy rain and reduced visibility, but nothing that suggests imminent danger. The critical failure that leads to 6 deaths begins not on the surface, but deep within the mountain slope above mile marker 47. The bedrock in this location consists of fractured metamorphic rock, schist, and gneiss that formed millions of years ago under intense heat and pressure. These rocks feature a pronounced foliation, a layered structure that creates natural planes of weakness. The orientation of these planes proves crucial. The foliation dips toward the highway at approximately 45 degrees, meaning the rock layers slope downward in the same direction as the cut face. This orientation, known to geologists as a dip slope, creates inherently unstable conditions because gravity pulls blocks of rock along the foliation planes toward the road cut. Under dry conditions, friction and interlocking of rough rock surfaces provide sufficient resistance to prevent movement. Water changes everything. As rain soaks into the ground and percolates through fractures in the bedrock, It fills the spaces between rock layers, creating what engineers call pore pressure. This pressure acts like a hydraulic jack, forcing rock layers apart and dramatically reducing friction along the foliation planes. Additionally, water adds enormous weight to the slope. A cubic yard of dry fractured rock weighs approximately 1.5 tons. When saturated, that same volume weighs more than 2 tons. Across the slope above the highway, thousands of cubic yards of rock and soil become heavier by the hour. The retaining wall at the base of the cut slope, already compromised by years of deferred maintenance, begins experiencing loads far exceeding its design capacity. Mortar joints that have deteriorated over 3 decades allow water to penetrate behind the wall, creating additional pressure. The wall itself weighs approximately 40 tons per linear foot, a substantial mass, but the forces building behind it grow exponentially as saturation increases. Small movements begin around 8 in the evening, invisible in the darkness and rain, mere fractions of an inch as rock masses shift and settle. These movements relieve some stress, but also break bonds between rock layers, reducing overall slope stability. The process accelerates in a feedback loop where each small failure makes larger failure more likely. At 9:15 in the evening, Robert Mitchell's Forest Service pickup approaches mile marker 47 from the downhill direction. His headlights cut through the rain and fog, illuminating the wet pavement and the curtain of water pouring off the rock face above the road. He drives carefully, both hands on the wheel, his speed reduced to about 25 miles per hour. The radio in his truck crackles with traffic from other Forest Service personnel monitoring conditions throughout the district. He keys the microphone and reports his location and the heavy rain, his voice calm and professional. Behind him, approximately half a mile down the grade, Sarah Chen's station wagon climbs the mountain. Her children sleep despite the drumming rain on the roof. She leans forward, peering through the windshield as her wipers struggle to keep pace with the downpour. The defroster runs at full blast to combat the fog forming on the inside of the glass. She makes a mental note to call her husband when she gets home to let him know the drive was worse than expected. Thomas Brennan's logging truck, despite being empty, handles poorly on the wet pavement. The truck's weight distribution shifts dramatically without a load, and Brennan feels the rear wheels slip slightly on the curves. He downshifts, using engine braking rather than relying on his brakes. He has driven this road in all conditions for more than 2 decades and respects what mountain weather can do. Jennifer Walsh follows about a quarter mile behind Brennan's truck. Her compact sedan feels light and skittish in the wind and rain. She grips the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles white, and second-guesses her decision to make this trip in such weather. The warm glow of home seems very far away. David Martinez approaches from the opposite direction, heading downhill. His headlights sweep across the rock faces and guardrails as he navigates the curves. He notices the heavy runoff crossing the pavement in several locations, mentally cataloging spots that might need attention once the storm passes. This is his road, in a sense. He takes pride in its maintenance, though he also knows about the deferred work, the budget constraints, the impossible task of keeping up with nature's relentless assault on infrastructure. Patricia Donovan, the last of the 6, drives uphill about 3/4 of a mile behind Walsh. Her new tires grip well, but she worries about the visibility and the lateness of the hour. She considers pulling over to wait out the worst of the storm, but sees no safe place to stop on the narrow mountain road. At 9:42 in the evening, the retaining wall above mile marker 47 reaches its breaking point. The failure begins at a section where mortar has completely deteriorated between several large foundation stones. Water pressure behind the wall forces these stones outward by several inches. The movement creates a gap, and water rushes through, eroding soil and small rock fragments from behind the wall. This erosion removes support from adjacent sections, and the failure propagates rapidly along 30 feet of wall length. The stones, each weighing several hundred pounds, topple onto the roadway. The sudden removal of support at the base of the cut slope triggers immediate failure of the rock mass above a wedge of fractured rock approximately 60 feet high, 80 feet wide, and averaging 15 feet thick begins to move. The volume exceeds 70,000 cubic feet, roughly 2,500 cubic yards, weighing approximately 5,000 tons when saturated. The initial movement is relatively slow, perhaps 1 foot per second, but the mass accelerates as it breaks free from surrounding rock. The sound is tremendous. a deep grinding roar punctuated by sharp cracks as rock fractures. The failure extends upward and outward, undercutting higher portions of the slope and triggering secondary failures. Within 15 seconds, the initial failure grows to encompass more than 4,000 cubic yards of rock, soil, and shattered trees. Robert Mitchell's pickup truck sits directly in the path as the first rocks reach the roadway. He has no warning, no time to react. The cab of his truck disappears under a cascade of stone and debris. The vehicle is pushed sideways off the road, tumbling down the steep slope toward the canyon bottom. The truck's radio transmits a brief burst of noise, metal scraping on rock, before going silent. Sarah Chen's station wagon is less than 200 feet behind Mitchell when the slope fails. She sees rocks bouncing across the road in her headlights and slams on her brakes. The car begins to skid on the wet pavement. Before the vehicle can stop, the leading edge of the landslide reaches her position. The station wagon is struck on the driver's side by a boulder weighing more than a ton, moving at high speed. The impact crushes the vehicle's frame and drives it off the road. The car tumbles down the slope, rolling multiple times before coming to rest against a large pine tree nearly 200 feet below the roadway. Thomas Brennan sees the catastrophe unfolding ahead of him and attempts to reverse his logging truck. The truck's transmission grinds as he forces it into reverse gear, and the vehicle begins backing down the grade. He manages to move approximately 50 feet before the expanding landslide reaches his position. The truck is engulfed by debris and pushed backward and sideways. The cab separates from the trailer as the vehicle goes over the edge. Brennan's truck falls end over end down the steep slope. Jennifer Walsh, behind Brennan, sees his brake lights and begins braking hard. Her car slides on the wet pavement toward the growing debris field. She cranks the steering wheel, attempting to turn around, but there is insufficient room on the narrow road. Her car is struck by falling rock and swept off the highway. The vehicle disappears into the darkness and rain, falling into the canyon. David Martinez, approaching from the opposite direction, sees a wall of debris suddenly appear across the road ahead. He stands on the brakes, and his vehicle skids toward the landslide. The front of his car impacts the debris pile, and the continuing flow of rock and soil pushes his vehicle backward and then sideways off the road. His car plunges down the embankment on the opposite side of the highway from where the other vehicles have fallen, tumbling into a different drainage. Patricia Donovan, still 3/4 of a mile from the failure site, sees nothing initially. She continues driving uphill through the rain, unaware that the road ahead no longer exists. By the time she rounds the final curve and her headlights illuminate the debris field blocking the highway, she is traveling too fast to stop on the wet pavement. Her car skids into the loose rock and soil. The unstable debris offers no resistance, and her vehicle plunges through it and over the edge, following the others into the canyon. The landslide continues for nearly 3 minutes after the initial failure. Successive waves of rock and soil pouring down the cut face and across the roadway. The sound echoes through the canyon, audible for miles, despite the heavy rain. When the movement finally stops, an estimated 6,000 cubic yards of material has come to rest on and around the former location of the highway. The roadway itself no longer exists for a length of approximately 120 feet. In its place lies a steep slope of loose, unstable debris, angled at nearly 45 degrees. The guardrails on both sides of the road have been swept away. Trees that once stood above the road lie splintered and broken in the debris. Boulders the size of compact cars rest on top of the pile. Water pours through and over the debris, creating dozens of small streams that cut channels through the loose material. The 6 vehicles lie scattered in the canyon below, buried under varying amounts of rock and soil, crushed and torn by the violence of their falls and the impacts of the debris that followed them down. None of the occupants survived the initial impacts and the crushing weight of the landslide. The vehicles' positions make them nearly invisible from above, even if someone could reach the edge of the destroyed roadway to look down. The rain continues to fall and the darkness is absolute. The first indication that something catastrophic has occurred comes at approximately 10:15 in the evening, when a motorist traveling uphill on Route 39 encounters the debris field and manages to stop safely. The driver, a local resident familiar with the road, initially believes he has encountered a typical rockfall, perhaps larger than usual but not unprecedented. He exits his vehicle with a flashlight and walks forward to assess the situation. As his flashlight beam plays across the debris, he realizes the scale of what has happened. The entire roadway has vanished. He returns to his vehicle and drives back down the mountain to the nearest location, with telephone service, a small store near the community of Coldbrook. He reaches the store at 10:40 and uses their telephone to call the California Highway Patrol. His report is initially unclear because he struggles to describe what he has seen. The dispatcher has difficulty understanding whether this is a simple rockfall or something more serious. The dispatcher contacts the local CHP office and requests that an officer respond to investigate. The first CHP officer arrives at the debris field from the downhill side at 11:20. Officer James Kowalski, a 15-year veteran, parks his patrol car at a safe distance and approaches on foot with a powerful flashlight and emergency flares. The rain has slackened slightly, but visibility remains poor. As Kowalski surveys the scene, he realizes this is far beyond a routine rockfall. He returns to his patrol car and radios for immediate assistance, requesting additional CHP units, Caltrans personnel, and search and rescue teams. He reports that the highway is completely destroyed and that there may be vehicles involved, though he cannot see any from his position. The CHP dispatcher activates the emergency response protocol for major highway incidents. Within 30 minutes, additional CHP units, Caltrans supervisors, and Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department search and rescue teams begin responding to the location. The Los Angeles County Fire Department dispatches a rescue squad. The Forest Service is notified because the incident occurs on land adjacent to the Angeles National Forest. The initial challenge facing responders is determining whether anyone is actually missing. The destroyed section of highway sites on a remote mountain road during a severe storm. Traffic volume is low, and there is no immediate way to know how many vehicles might have been on that section of road when the landslide occurred. CHP officers position themselves at both ends of the affected area and begin stopping motorists to ask if they have seen any vehicles ahead of them, or if they are aware of anyone who might have been traveling this route. Around midnight, the Forest Service reports that Ranger Robert Mitchell failed to check in at his expected time and is not responding to radio calls. His last known position, reported by his own radio transmission, places him in the immediate vicinity of mile marker 47 shortly before the landslide. This information transforms the incident from a highway closure to a potential rescue operation. Search and rescue teams begin preparing to descend into the canyon despite the darkness, rain, and extremely hazardous conditions. The steep terrain, unstable debris, and continuing rockfall risk make any descent attempt extraordinarily dangerous. Incident commanders struggle with the decision of whether to risk rescuer lives when they have no confirmation that anyone needs rescue. The report of Mitchell's missing radio contact tips the decision toward action. At 12:40 in the morning on February 13th, the first search and rescue team begins descending from a point approximately 300 yards downhill from the landslide site, where the terrain offers a slightly less steep access to the canyon bottom. The team consists of 6 experienced mountain rescue specialists equipped with ropes, lights, and medical supplies. The descent takes more than an hour in the darkness and rain. The team reaches the canyon bottom at approximately 2 in the morning and begins working their way upstream toward the area below the landslide. At 2:30, team members discover the first vehicle, Robert Mitchell's Forest Service pickup, crushed almost beyond recognition and buried under several feet of rock and soil. The rescuers carefully excavate around the vehicle and confirm that Mitchell is still inside. He has not survived the impact and burial. The team leader radios the grim news to the incident command post above. The search continues. Over the next 3 hours, as dawn begins to provide some natural light despite the continuing rain, rescue teams locate 5 more vehicles in the canyon below the destroyed highway. Each vehicle tells the same terrible story: massive impact damage, burial under rock and debris, and occupants who have succumbed to the violence of the landslide and the falls into the canyon. Sarah Chen's station wagon is found with all 3 family members still inside. The vehicle's passenger compartment has been crushed to a fraction of its original size. Thomas Brennan's logging truck lies in pieces scattered across a 100-foot area. The cab, separated from the trailer, rests upside down, wedged between 2 large boulders. Jennifer Walsh's compact sedan has been flattened to less than 2 feet of vertical clearance. David Martinez's vehicle, on the opposite side of the former roadway, has tumbled into a separate drainage and comes to rest partially submerged in a rain-swollen creek. Patricia Donovan's car, the last to go over the edge, lies nearest to the debris pile, buried under an estimated 50 cubic yards of rock and soil. By 6 in the morning, Rescue personnel have confirmed 6 fatalities. No survivors are found. The recovery operation shifts from rescue to the grim task of extricating bodies from crushed vehicles buried under tons of debris. The immediate aftermath of the California mountain road collapse presents a scene of devastation that shocks even experienced emergency responders. 6 people lose their lives in the disaster, including 3 members of the Chen family. The causes of death, as later determined by the county medical examiner, include massive blunt force trauma from impacts and crushing injuries from burial under debris. The violence of the landslide and the falls into the canyon make survival impossible. The 3 Chen children become orphaned in an instant as their mother perishes alongside them. Robert Mitchell's death leaves behind a wife and teenage daughter. Thomas Brennan, just 7 years from retirement, never makes it home to the logging camp. Jennifer Walsh, beginning what should have been a long teaching career, loses her life before she can truly start. David Martinez, ironically a road maintenance worker, becomes a victim of the very infrastructure he worked to maintain. Patricia Donovan, returning from a medical appointment, succumbs just miles from home. The physical destruction of the highway is total for a length of 120 feet, with an additional 300 feet of roadway damaged and unstable. The estimated volume of debris covering the roadway and filling the canyon below exceeds 6,000 cubic yards. Boulders weighing several tons rest on top of the debris pile. The guardrails on both sides of the road have been completely destroyed for a length of more than 200 feet. Trees and vegetation have been stripped from the slope, leaving raw rock and soil exposed. The environmental impact extends downstream as sediment from the landslide chokes the creek for more than a mile below the failure site. Water quality in the watershed degrades significantly. Aquatic life in the affected stream sections perishes due to sediment loading. The local community of Crystal Lake, population approximately 200, finds itself cut off from the valley below. The only road access to the community passes through the destroyed section of highway. Residents face a choice of either evacuating by helicopter or remaining isolated until the road can be rebuilt, a process that will take months. The media response intensifies as news of the disaster spreads. Television crews arrive by mid-morning on February 13th, filming the destruction from vantage points above and below the failure site. Newspapers across California run front-page stories about the tragedy. The fact that an entire family perishes in the landslide particularly captures public attention. Families of the victims begin receiving official notification throughout the early morning hours of February 13th, each notification delivered by CHP officers or sheriff's deputies, each conversation devastating. The community response is immediate, with neighbors and friends organizing support for the families who have lost loved ones. The investigation into the fatal landslide begins within hours of the discovery of the victims and continues for more than 8 months. The California Division of Highways, the predecessor to Caltrans, takes primary responsibility for the technical investigation, working in cooperation with the U.S. Geological Survey, independent geotechnical consultants, and the California Highway Patrol investigators face immediate challenges in accessing and documenting the failure site due to continuing instability and weather conditions. The rain finally stops on February 14th, but the slope above the destroyed highway remains saturated and prone to additional failures. Small rockfalls continue for several days. Engineers establish a safety perimeter and prohibit access to the immediate area until stabilization measures can be implemented. Photographic documentation begins from helicopters and from safe vantage points on adjacent ridges. Investigators carefully map the extent of the failure, the location of the destroyed highway, and the positions where vehicles are found in the canyon below. Survey teams establish precise coordinates for all key features. The investigation team conducts a detailed review of the highway's construction history, maintenance records, and inspection reports. This review reveals the 1963 inspection report recommending retaining wall repairs that were never completed. The documentation shows that budget constraints and competing priorities resulted in the deferral of the recommended work. Investigators obtain weather records from the National Weather Service and from local rain gauges, establishing that the 5-day rainfall total at the site exceeds 19 inches, with peak intensities exceeding 1 inch per hour. This rainfall represents a storm with an estimated recurrence interval of approximately 50 years, meaning a storm of this magnitude has only a 2% probability of occurring in any given year. However, investigators note that the highway has stood for 31 years, meaning it has experienced roughly a 60% probability of encountering such a storm during its service life. The design of the highway and its drainage systems proves inadequate for this level of rainfall. Once the slope stabilizes sufficiently, geotechnical engineers descend to the failure site to examine the exposed rock faces and collect samples. The investigation reveals the critical role of rock foliation orientation in creating unstable conditions. The rock layers dip toward the highway at angles between 40 and 50 degrees, creating what geologists term a kinematic release, where the geometry of rock layering predisposes the slope to failure. Laboratory testing of rock samples confirms that the metamorphic rocks have low shear strength when wet, and that the foliation planes provide minimal resistance to sliding once water pressure develops. Engineers calculate that the factor of safety for the slope under dry conditions is approximately 1.3, meaning the resisting forces exceed the driving forces by 30%. This provides a minimal safety margin. Under saturated conditions, with water pressure acting along foliation planes and the added weight of water in the rock mass, the factor of safety drops below 1.0, meaning failure becomes inevitable. The investigation determines that the retaining wall, while substantial, is inadequate for the loads it experiences during extreme rainfall. The wall lacks proper drainage features to relieve water pressure from behind. The deteriorated mortar joints compromise the wall's structural integrity. Even a well-maintained wall of this design would struggle under the conditions present on February 12th. But the deferred maintenance transforms a marginal situation into a fatal one. The medical examiner's investigation into the 6 deaths provides factual but difficult findings. Autopsies confirm that all 6 individuals succumbed to blunt force trauma, consistent with vehicle impacts and burial under heavy debris. The violence of the landslide and the subsequent falls into the canyon prove immediately fatal. In all cases, the medical examiner determines that the victims likely have no awareness of the disaster as it unfolds, with death occurring within seconds of the initial impacts. This finding provides little comfort to families, but at least confirms that their loved ones do not suffer prolonged trauma. The investigation reconstructs the timeline of how each vehicle becomes caught in the landslide based on the positions where they are found, damage patterns, and witness statements from the motorist who first discovered the debris field. The sequence begins with Robert Mitchell's pickup, followed within seconds by Sarah Chen's station wagon, then Thomas Brennan's logging truck, Jennifer Walsh's sedan, David Martinez's vehicle approaching from the opposite direction, and finally Patricia Donovan's car. The entire sequence, from the first vehicle impact to the last, spans less than 2 minutes. The investigation examines whether any warning signs or monitoring systems might have provided advance notice of the impending failure. The conclusion is sobering. Given the technology and practices of 1970, detecting the precursor movements in the darkness and heavy rain would have been virtually impossible. The movements that occur in the hours before the catastrophic failure are measured in fractions of an inch and are invisible without sophisticated monitoring equipment that does not exist at the site. Even if such equipment were present, the time between the onset of detectable movement and catastrophic failure is likely too short to evacuate the area or close the road. The investigation does determine that better geological surveys during the original highway construction might have identified the unfavorable rock structure and either routed the highway differently or implemented more robust slope stabilization from the beginning. The investigation also finds that completing the recommended retaining wall repairs from 1963 might have delayed or possibly prevented the failure, though the extreme rainfall conditions would have challenged even a properly maintained wall. The root cause of the fatalities, according to the investigation's final report, is a combination of adverse geological conditions that were not adequately assessed during design, inadequate slope support systems for the conditions encountered, deferred maintenance that compromised existing protective features, and an extreme weather event that exceeded the capacity of the drainage and support systems. The report notes that all 6 deaths are preventable through better site characterization, improved design standards, adequate maintenance funding, and more conservative approach to highway routing in unstable terrain. The legal consequences of the disaster unfold over the next 3 years. Families of all 6 victims file wrongful death lawsuits against the state of California, arguing that negligent maintenance and inadequate design contribute to their loved ones' deaths. The state initially contests the lawsuits, arguing that the extreme weather event constitutes an act of God beyond reasonable prevention. However, as the investigation findings become public, particularly the documentation of deferred maintenance and the inadequate initial geological assessment, the state's position becomes increasingly difficult to defend. In 1972, the state reaches settlements with all 6 families. The settlement amounts, which remain confidential under the terms of the agreements, reportedly total more than $2 million, a substantial sum for the era. The settlements include provisions for ongoing support for the Chen children, who lose both their mother and their siblings in the disaster. No criminal charges are filed, as investigators determine that while negligence occurs, it does not rise to the level of criminal culpability. The disaster does not result from intentional misconduct, but rather from systemic failures in prioritization, funding, and risk assessment. The California legislature responds to the disaster by appropriating emergency funding for comprehensive surveys of slope stability along all state highways in mountainous terrain. This survey, conducted between 1971 and 1974, identifies more than 300 locations with geological conditions similar to those at mile marker 47. Many of these sites receive immediate stabilization work or enhanced monitoring. The legislature also passes new requirements for regular wet weather inspections of high-risk highway sections, mandating that inspections occur during or immediately after significant rain events when slope instability is most likely to manifest. The California Division of Highways implements new design standards for retaining walls and cut slopes in mountainous terrain, requiring more conservative slope angles, enhanced drainage systems, and more robust support structures. The new standards specify that any cut slope in foliated metamorphic rock must be evaluated by a licensed geologist, and designs must account for worst-case saturation conditions. The division also establishes a dedicated maintenance fund that cannot be diverted for other purposes, ensuring that critical safety repairs receive priority regardless of budget pressures. The long-term impact of the California Mountain Road collapse of 1970 extends far beyond the immediate tragedy. The disaster serves as a catalyst for fundamental changes in how California and other states approach highway safety in mountainous terrain. The deaths of 6 people, including an entire family, force a reckoning with the consequences of deferred maintenance and inadequate geological assessment. In the years following the disaster, slope stability becomes a central consideration in highway design and maintenance, rather than an afterthought. The technical lessons learned from the investigation influence engineering practice across the United States. Geotechnical engineers begin paying much closer attention to rock structure orientation and its implications for slope stability. The concept of kinematic analysis, evaluating whether rock layer geometry allows potential failure modes, becomes standard practice in highway cut slope design. Drainage design for highway cuts evolves to include more robust systems for managing groundwater and surface water, recognizing that water pressure is often the trigger that transforms marginally stable slopes into active failures. The Highway 39 disaster is featured in engineering textbooks and case study courses, ensuring that future generations of civil engineers understand the consequences of inadequate site characterization and maintenance. A memorial to the 6 victims is dedicated in 1973 at a turnout approximately 1 mile from the disaster site. The memorial features a granite marker with the names of Robert Mitchell, Sarah Chen and her 2 children, Thomas Brennan, Jennifer Walsh, David Martinez, and Patricia Donovan. The inscription reads, "In memory of those who lost their lives here on February 12, 1970, may their sacrifice remind us that safety must never be compromised." Families of the victims attend the dedication ceremony, and annual memorial services continue for many years. The rebuilt section of State Route 39 incorporates lessons learned from the disaster. The new alignment shifts the roadway farther from the unstable slope, and extensive rock anchors and shotcrete stabilize the cut faces. A massive retaining wall, engineered to modern standards with proper drainage and reinforcement, protects the uphill side of the road. The new drainage system includes multiple culverts and channels designed to handle rainfall events far exceeding the 1970 storm. Warning signs alert motorists to the history of the location and the potential for rockfall. The reconstruction takes 18 months and costs more than $3 million, far more than the original construction, but incorporating safety features that would have been unimaginable in the 1930s. The disaster influences how transportation agencies across the country budget for maintenance. The concept of deferred maintenance being a false economy gains traction. with safety advocates pointing to the Highway 39 disaster as proof that spending money on preventive repairs costs far less than responding to catastrophic failures. Many states implement asset management systems that prioritize maintenance based on risk assessment rather than simply deferring work due to budget constraints. The families of the victims, while devastated by their losses, find some measure of meaning in knowing that the deaths of their loved ones lead to changes that save other lives. The Chen family establishes a scholarship fund in memory of Sarah and her children, supporting students studying civil engineering with an emphasis on public safety. The fund continues to provide scholarships more than 50 years after the disaster. Robert Mitchell's widow becomes an advocate for increased funding for Forest Service infrastructure maintenance, testifying before Congress about the importance of adequate resources for maintaining roads and facilities in remote areas. Her advocacy contributes to increased appropriations for Forest Service maintenance budgets in the mid-1970s. The California Mountain Road collapse of 1970 stands as a stark reminder that infrastructure safety requires constant vigilance, adequate funding, and a willingness to prioritize long-term stability over short-term budget considerations. 6 people lose their lives because a combination of adverse geological conditions, inadequate initial design, and deferred maintenance creates a situation where an extreme but foreseeable weather event triggers catastrophic failure. The deaths are preventable, a fact that makes the tragedy even more poignant. The investigation reveals that the warning signs are present years before the disaster, documented in inspection reports that recommend repairs, but those recommendations are not acted upon due to competing priorities and budget constraints. The disaster teaches the engineering community that geological conditions must be thoroughly understood before cutting highways into mountainous terrain, that rock structure orientation can create hidden instability, that water is often the trigger that transforms stable slopes into deadly landslides, and that maintenance is not optional, but rather a critical component of infrastructure safety. The human cost of the disaster: 6 lives ended in an instant on a rainy mountain road, 6 families shattered, 3 children orphaned, provides the emotional weight that drives meaningful change. Engineers and policymakers who might have treated slope stability as an abstract technical problem are forced to confront the reality that their decisions have life and death consequences. The memorial to the victims serves as a permanent reminder of what happens when safety is compromised, when maintenance is deferred, when risk is underestimated. The changes implemented after the disaster, from improved design standards to enhanced inspection protocols to dedicated maintenance funding, represent the victim's legacy. Every highway cut slope that is now properly drained, every retaining wall that is maintained before it fails, every geological survey that identifies adverse conditions before construction begins, honors the memory of those who died on February 12, 1970. The disaster's impact extends beyond transportation engineering to influence how society thinks about infrastructure maintenance in general. The concept that critical infrastructure requires ongoing investment to remain safe, that deferring maintenance is not a cost saving but rather a risk that can have catastrophic consequences, gains broader acceptance. The Highway 39 disaster becomes a case study not just for engineers but for policymakers, budget analysts, and anyone responsible for maintaining public infrastructure. More than 5 decades after the tragedy, State Route 39 continues to serve mountain communities, but the section that once collapsed into the canyon is now among the most thoroughly engineered and carefully maintained highway segments in California. The road stands as both a memorial to those who died and a testament to the lessons learned from their deaths. Every vehicle that safely traverses that section of highway represents a small victory, a life not lost because the mistakes of 1970 have not been repeated. The families of Robert Mitchell, Sarah Chen and her children, Thomas Brennan, Jennifer Walsh, David Martinez, and Patricia Donovan can take some comfort in knowing that their loved ones' deaths were not in vain, that the tragedy prompted changes that have undoubtedly prevented other families from experiencing similar losses. The 6 people who set out on routine journeys on that rainy February evening could not have known they were driving toward disaster, could not have imagined that the road ahead would literally disappear beneath them. Their deaths remind us that infrastructure safety is not abstract or theoretical but deeply personal, that behind every engineering decision are real human lives that depend on getting those decisions right. If this story about preventable tragedy and lost lives gave you insight into why safety matters in infrastructure, maintenance and design, Leave your like and share with others who appreciate learning from fatal accidents, so that the lessons learned might help prevent future tragedies and honor the memory of those who lost their lives.